I'm so excited to have you in studio because anxiety is a huge topic. Yeah. I don't know, I keep hearing these dismal data points about the mental health issues that collectively we're all experiencing today. Mm-hmm. And I think there are definitely some like larger sociocultural issues that one might point to. But I'm excited to get to the root cause. So I guess starting high level, anxiety can manifest in so many different ways.
Yeah.
What would you say are the most common ways in which you see it in your clinical practice?
I love this question because already you're coming out the door with a paradigm shift. The general conversation about anxiety is, do you have autonomic arousal? And we could talk about what that looks like. Or do you not? And is it all the time or is it out of the blue? And so then they have two main categories. One is generalized anxiety. You're just kind of low-grade anxious all the time. It can spike in intensity. And then we have panic disorder, where you can have these panic attacks, which they say are out of the blue. And that's all the farther we generally get. Sometimes we could say you're depressed with anxious features, or you're anxious and your heart is pounding. But then we're not able to do more digging and be more curious about it, because it's anxiety, right? And so I love your first question because you're demanding a paradigm shift. Is we're looking at what are the symptoms of anxiety and how are they unique by the individual, and then what is the value in looking at that? And so if we look at all of the data, and I did this in my book, is we looked at all the research data and looked at all the common symptoms that people experience. We even took some outliers, the extreme ends of anxiety, whether it's total collapse or dissociation, or some people, they have seizures from autonomic arousal. We looked at both of those, and then I created 9 systems. And those 9 systems allow us to be more creative with research, allow us to get more specific in root cause testing, allow us to get more strategic in the recommendations that we make. So a concrete example, if I may.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, please.
So somebody goes to the doctor and they're like, I'm having anxiety attacks. And the doctor's like, well, we have a couple of options. One is you can take an antidepressant. And so you're going to have possible weight gain, possible changes in your libido. It's possible that you could feel suicidal, but it's also possible that within 2 weeks you might start feeling a little bit less anxious. Okay, what's my next option? We could give you a benzodiazepine for the heart pounding and the heart palpitations, but the trade-off is it's a controlled substance. You have to be very mindful and careful with the dosing, and it'll probably make you feel like a zombie, so productivity may go down. Or the third option is we could give you a beta blocker, and this is an off-label use. A beta blocker is like propranolol, which can slow down the heart contractility. And so now the person with chest anxiety, where it's showing up in their chest, the best option for them may be that beta blocker, because it's stopping the heart from beating so hard and so fast. And so if their anxiety, on the other hand, manifested in their gut, and they were getting gas and bloating and indigestion, and some people even get diarrhea when they're anxious, a beta blocker is not going to work for that. So asking the question about what is anxiety allows us to get a little bit more creative in research and development and treatment.
I love that. Yeah. And chronic benzo use is associated with like long-term increased risk for dementia.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there's no time and place where it's the best possible option.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's probably not something that you want to be on long-term, I would imagine.
They recommend that you shouldn't take it more than a few weeks. And after 3 consecutive days, then tolerance can develop and you got to taper down.
And I would imagine that's quite the process.
Yeah. During the pandemic, I don't know if you saw, there's a New York Times article, and they were like, record levels of anxiety, and we're worried about a medication shortage, because so many people, new patients, were going into the doctor, and they're like very anxious and fearful. They're getting dispensed more medications than have been precedented, and so we were worried about a medication shortage.
Wow. And beta blockers, I was under the suspicion or the assumption that they block the physical symptoms of anxiety, but not all physical symptoms, you're saying, right? Like not the GI symptoms.
Right. They have an affinity for the cardiovascular system. And I think what you just touched on, you hinted at, is that touches the symptoms, right? The symptoms are telling us that there's an underlying imbalance. It's data from the body. And so Are you deficient in a SSRI, or are you deficient in a benzo, or are you deficient in a beta blocker? Probably not.
Yeah, right? It's
Right?
like anxiety is probably not due to a beta blocker deficiency
Right.
or a benzo deficiency.
More propranolol.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or an SSRI deficiency.
Right.
So what would you say are the root causes of anxiety? And from a holistic perspective, I mean, how do we get to the root cause?
Anxiety is an adaptation. So whenever somebody comes in and they have anxiety, the question that we want to ask is, what are these symptoms an adaptation to?
Like, what are they trying to tell me?
Yes. It's kind of like if you go to DC in the winter, right? You have to put on a winter coat. It's cold as heck outside. You're an LA person. So you don't have the blood to deal with winter in DC.
No.
So you put on the winter coat. It keeps you warm. That's an adaptation. Similarly, when we go through adversity, stress, overwhelm, all the way up the spectrum to trauma, our body, our nervous system, our gut microbiome, our behaviors, our hormones, everything jumps into place to try to help you adapt to that, right? And so that's like putting the coat on. The key here is that adaptation fluid and continuous? Do we have continued neuroplasticity? Is the gut continuing to evolve? Are we eating things that allow our guts to continue to evolve? Or do you come back to LA and you keep that coat on and you get hot and now you have symptoms? Something that was helpful in the past in a different time and place is now making you overheat and you feel sick and you have symptoms. So the question is what was your DC? And how is that adaptation showing up in your life right now, which can show up on the whole continuum head to toe?
What's the difference between like chronic anxiety, clinical anxiety, like the anxiety that somebody might actually be motivated to make a doctor's appointment to get to the bottom of, versus like just the normal anxiety that we all experience time to time?
The key is context. So if you are into, like, do you do any extreme sports or like anything that gets your dopamine going, your adrenaline going?
My dopamine, yeah, but not extreme sports. I mean, I'm actually not a big adrenaline junkie.
Neither am I.
Yeah, I don't know.
What about boxing?
Yes, I did take up boxing
Nice.
over the pandemic, yeah.
Okay, so boxing, like when you're hitting it, your body is producing stress hormone, you're getting excited, you're getting hot, you're sweating, your muscles are contracting, you're wailing on that boxing pad, right? And so those physical symptoms that your body is producing, your brain is putting in the context of, yeah, I'm kicking ass boxing, right? It feels good. It feels powerful. It's an empowered context. Your brain has labeled that as, yeah, we like this. You're going into autonomic arousal, but that feels in your power and it feels fun, right? But what if all of those same sensations happen to you when you're trying to do a podcast, or when you're trying to go to bed at night, or you're driving down the freeway? The context is different. So suddenly some sensations that felt really good and really empowering and really enlivening now feel like they're taking away your personal power. They're taking away your sense of control. You feel confused, which makes sense when we come from a medical paradigm that tells us that the authority knows more about our bodies than we do.
It's intrusive. That would be the difference, I suppose.
Yes. Right? It feels, and for a lot of people, it feels completely out of context. It's like, I have no idea what the language of my symptoms means. And I don't feel like I have the personal power to know what to do about it besides turn to these small little bucket of treatments. And then that perpetuates, oftentimes treatments, doctors want to relieve suffering. And so therefore we often prescribe treatments to suppress symptoms, to relieve suffering, like a benzo. Someone's having a panic attack. Thank God for benzos. They could be debilitating. But what we deny will amplify, and what we resist will persist. And so then something that started really small, like a whisper, starts to get louder and louder and louder. And then suddenly it's like, I can't deal with this anymore. I legit have to go to see a doctor. This is just out of my realm of daily tolerance. It's inhibiting my relationships. It's inhibiting my life. It's inhibiting my performance. I feel like I don't know who I am anymore. And then people go to the doctor. But whatever was that winter coat, whatever that was in the beginning, is still there unless they figure out how to understand those messages and distill them.
Yeah, I seldom have. I mean, I've definitely had intrusive, like anxious thoughts. Um, I used to hate long distance flights.
Mm-hmm.
Until I actually discovered benzos, and I never take them outside of the context of like a very long distance flight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like for me, it's actually been really productive because it's opened up the world. I feel like I could travel tomorrow to Australia
Mm-hmm.
and be okay. But I used to get like horrible anxiety on long distance flights. Like I couldn't sleep or whatever. And at a certain point, I felt like, yeah, I don't really love taking these kinds of drugs, but the benefits certainly outweigh the risks for me in that context.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a form of empowerment. It's a tool
Totally.
that allows you to grow your world, as opposed to feeling like this tool is something that you require in order to live your life. Right? So when I think about this, I think about the continuum of anxiety or autonomic arousal. And so on one end, we have like jogging around here. So on one end, we have the green light, and you're feeling calm, you're creative, you're in an alpha wave state in your brain, you're kind of flow, you're chilling, it's good. And then something shifts, and it could be something as easy as facing forward as we are for more than 20 minutes. And something can shift, and I could talk about that. That's very interesting. It's a hack that a lot of people don't know about. We'll get to that. But something can shift, and your autonomic nervous system starts to go a little bit into arousal, right? And so then you're starting to notice I feel a little tense, or I'm feeling a little hot, or my stomach's a little churny, or I'm getting a tension headache, or if they interrupt me one more time, just a little irritated, right? So you start to notice these signs and symptoms. And if whatever that stimuli is that's provoking that response in your mind and your body, then it could go all the way up to the red light, which is crisis. So circling back to the benzos is I've had so many people come to me and they're like, I was having a panic attack and someone told me to just breathe and I wanted to slug them. And then another person's like, I was having mild performance anxiety and my doctor gave me a benzo. And then I felt like I couldn't perform on stage as well. So it's a mismatch. And so what you're describing is an appropriate matching of the treatment to the level of arousal and the duration of support that you need. Because a long flight, you're out of your window of tolerance. You're like, I can handle going from like LA to DC, but from LA to Australia, just like, please just sedate me.
Yeah.
Let me sleep.
Totally. So it's about matching the treatment to the context in which the anxiety is provoked.
Yes.
Okay, so what tools then might listeners, viewers use as, I guess, in terms of taking a self-inventory and then matching their symptoms to an appropriate treatment?
Yeah. So let's do this in 4 steps. So the first step is you want to get your logical brain on board, because when we go into arousal, we see changes in the brain where the emotional brain gets louder. This is your amygdala. Those areas become more active. They start to run the show. We call this the default mode network. So it's like your autopilot team. We live a lot of our lives in autopilot, actually. And so your autopilot team is kicking in. It's sort of like you're gathering berries in the forest and a tiger's coming. You don't want to be like, what's the personality of the tiger? What is the etymology? Like, whatever. It's like, you don't want to analyze that tiger. You just want to be like, run, right? So the default mode part of your brain does that. And then your executive control network, which is the prefrontal cortex behind your forehead, the logical analytical brain, that's shut off. It's offline. So people will feel like when they're panicking, I can't think logically. I can't remember things very well. It's all kind of muddled. And so when we go into arousal, the first thing we want to do is employ tools that are going to get us back into our executive dream team analytical brain, where you have that power and you can problem solve and figure out what the heck was that, right? So what are those tools? So one is vagus nerve. And so I'm sure you've come across that a ton in your work and in your study. And so we could circle back to vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is going to be your very best hack. But other things that are going to be really valuable for that moment.
What can you define that for people who are not familiar?
Absolutely.
With the vagus nerve?
Yeah, the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the brain. It's not like slot machines in Nevada. This is vagus, V-A-G-U-S. And so
Took me a second to get that, but
you're like, wait, what?
I like it. I like your sense of humor.
You're like, we took a trip to Vegas together.
I love Vegas. My family just moved there, actually. I'm a fan.
Well, perfect. You also love your vagus nerve. So that's the nerve that connects your brain to your gut, and it's a bilateral highway. And so your gut communicates to your brain, and your brain communicates to your gut, and they're constantly chatting. And you do a lot of work with nutrition and diet in the gut. And so the work that you do connects with the gut, and then the gut does like 80% of the talking. So the microbes in your gut they create your cravings, they create your emotions. You think you love cheesecake? No, the candida in your body loves cheesecake, right? And it's producing a craving. So when we're in that high arousal, we want to go to the vagus nerve. And when we stimulate the vagus nerve, it can switch us into calm. And an extreme example of this is, have you ever heard of a vasovagal response?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Actually, I had one once. Yeah, when I was getting like a procedure done.
You did?
Blood pressure like dropped to the floor. They needed to give me like orange juice to make me feel better.
Yeah.
Like my blood,
That's the worst, right? So your blood pressure crashes, your blood sugar crashes. Your body's like, we're going to make you horizontal because then gravity can pull the blood to your brain, right? So that's what happens at the vagus nerve. You have a vasovagal reaction, so your vagus nerve is inappropriately activated.
Wow. Yeah, it's like an extreme like stress response.
Yeah. That happened to me not too long ago. Can I take a sidebar?
Yeah, please.
We're going to really like lay into this Vegas thing.
I like it.
So I flew back from Miami, actually, and I got some glorious plague on the plane or from Miami, and I was like, I need an IV. I feel like garbage. So in medical school, we did IVs, and I was always told, don't get bubbles in the line. Bubbles in the line, bad, right? So I'm getting this IV, and she's like, oh, do you want this immunity boost? And I'm like, immunity boost? I'm here for it. So she's like pumping and mixing, and then she injects it into the bag that I'm getting, and I'm watching, and all of these bubbles go into the line, and they enter my body. And I'm like, that was a lot of bubbles. And she's like, oh, you're fine. It's not that bad.
Whoa.
And so my brain is like, we're going to die. So she walks away, and I look over at my husband, who's just typing on his computer next to me, and I was like, Paul, I'm having a vasovagal reaction. And then like, just like that, it was so fast. My blood pressure crashed. I got cold and clammy. My heart slowed down. She came rushing over, and so she did the vagus nerve things that I'm going to teach you about, like smell alcohol and go horizontal. And so the point of that story is that our body can produce all sorts of funny symptoms, even when logically it doesn't make any sense. So she told me I was fine. I wasn't feeling an emboli, right? But my body had already decided we're going to die.
Yeah, you saw something scary. It freaked you out. You had like a panic attack.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was not fun.
Don't the things that like, don't they filter out the air bubbles? Like, do you think that those air bubbles probably didn't actually make their way into your system?
Oh, they went in.
Really?
Yeah, I watched them go into my veins.
That's extremely dangerous, is it not? Or is there like an amount of air that's...
I know, right? So I asked her, she's like, what was that after all was said and done? After I was like done throwing up all over the place. And she's like, what was that? And I was like, there were bubbles in the line. She's like, they just say that. It's like if you get a whole line and you just put a whole line in, that's bad.
Yeah.
She's like, you had just a few bubbles. It's okay.
Wow. Good to know, I guess.
Yeah.
Still scary, but
if y'all get bubbles in the line, don't panic.
Damn. So what did you do? You lied down.
Yep.
Did they give you some kind of sugary drink? Because doesn't blood sugar crash as well?
Exactly. So she had me suck on something. She put cold on my chest, on my head, around my eyes. And we tipped the chair. And I was like, just let me pass out. And they're like, no.
Okay, so how do we stimulate the vagus nerve in a way that isn't that? How do we do that?
Okay. I want to show you something, and it would require that I touch your wrist. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yes. Okay. This one isn't covered, and my hands are very cold, so forgive me. They say cold hands, warm heart, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You have a very strong pulse. So take your fingers, and I want you to feel your pulse here.
Okay.
Okay. So
Feel it.
The vagus nerve is going to regulate your heart rate, and we are able to see this with biofeedback, but we all don't run around with biofeedback devices, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to hack your vagus nerve right now, and you're going to tell me what you notice. And so for those who are listening, we're finding our pulse in our wrist. Max has a really easy findable pulse, but if you can't find your pulse, watch a YouTube video, see if you can locate it. But if you can't locate it, maybe place your hand on your chest or in your neck. But what we're going to do is you're going to notice the speed of your pulse. You're going to kind of notice the count and the rhythm of your pulse. And then I want you to breathe with me, and I want you to notice what happens. So you're going to inhale, and you do 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold your breath at the top. 2, 3, 4. And now vigorous exhale. 5, 4, 3. Push it out. Yeah. Okay. That was the first time we were learning the steps. So do you want to do it one more time? Okay. Notice the speed, and then you're going to inhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. Hold, hold. Now exhale. Really big sigh. 4, 3, 2, 1. What did you notice with the rate?
It slowed.
Yeah. At what
my
part?
Pulse.
At what part?
I wasn't paying attention to the, but I would say probably on the exhale.
Yes. You did it.
I did it?
You did it.
Wow.
You just hacked your vagus nerve.
Yeah, my pulse slowed.
Yeah. So what happens is on the exhale, that's what activates parasympathetic.
Is that what's called box breathing?
Yes.
What you just did? What we just did?
You just did box breathing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so make it really simple. You inhale for 4 seconds.
Yeah.
You hold it for 4 seconds.
Yeah.
You exhale for 4 seconds, or you exhale vigorously, or both somehow?
The better the exhale, the more vigorous the exhale, the more effect it will have. And so it's easy to say box technique. In my book, I call it like the funky box.
So the tempo of the exhale doesn't matter? Or I mean like...
Long, hard, kind of like an ohm, right?
Got it.
If you do yoga, so you just like exhale long and hard. But have you ever seen a kid and they get really mad and they're like... and then they just like ball their fist and they bear down. So that can also that can activate vagus nerve. But then if you ever see them just like, they just sigh. They're just, they're so frustrated.
Yeah.
Vagus nerve.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And it's called box breathing. Why? Because
you just
like
draw
4,
a box.
4, 4, 4.
Yeah.
Wow.
But play with it.
You know what I wonder? I wonder if it has anything to do with the nitric oxide pathway.
Oh my gosh, brilliant. Talk
because
more.
There are studies that have found, I believe, that just humming increases by a dramatic proportion the amount of nitric oxide in your blood vessels, which is obviously it's a gas. It reduces blood pressure. It increases blood flow.
Yeah.
So by humming, you're doing that. So I wonder if there's like an overlapping mechanism,
And your vagus goes through your larynx. So it would be so interesting to look at the research between the two of those. So it's like, is it the nitrous oxide stimulating vagus stimulating nitrous oxide? Like, is there a link?
Yeah.
All right, that's your homework.
Yeah.
Is write a paper.
I like it. Okay, so that's really helpful.
Yeah.
That's super helpful.
Something you have with you all the time. And so when people tell you to breathe, and so when I saw that on a biofeedback device and then was able to feel my own body, then I'm like, oh, okay, I'm on board. I'll breathe.
What about some other causes of common anxiety? I mean, like caffeine, I would assume, is a big one.
Yeah. I have my espresso here.
Yeah, I mean, caffeine's not bad. Coffee's not bad. It's certainly, I mean, I think it's a really healthful beverage, actually. But but I would assume that that's an undue cause of anxiety for a lot of people, over consumption of caffeine today.
Yeah. Exogenous autonomic arousal stimulants versus endogenous, right? From in the body. So what are things in our lifestyle or our behaviors or our environment that are making us anxious? So for example, there's a hack. So you have in your brain a network that its job is total filtration. And so it's looking at all the stimuli in your environment. It's looking at the interoceptive data from your body. So hunger, position, all these different factors. And so it's 11 billion data points per second. Our brain can process like 50.
Wow.
So it's like a strainer. So envision, like a noodle strainer or something like that, and you're rinsing out your rice or whatever you're doing. And so all of this data is coming in, and then that network is sending on whatever is relevant to the amygdala, the big feeling, emotional processing part of the brain. And then the amygdala is looking at referential information from the hippocampus. It's like, have we seen this before? Hippocampus is like, yep, checks out, no big deal. Or, we associate this with something 25 years ago, and haha, that's dangerous, right?
Right.
And then we have these reactions. So what's really interesting is you and I have been having this conversation, and we've been facing each other. And interoceptive data has studied the effects of that. And so when we think of fight, flight, freeze, when we think of a deer in headlight and freeze, what is that deer doing? It's holding still. It's looking forward. Its body is rigid. If we look at ourselves when we're facing and having a conversation, reading a screen, looking at our phones, maybe even reading a book, we're inadvertently putting ourselves in a freeze position. And then we start to feel that autonomic arousal. So the body's like, oh, we're in freeze. There might be something wrong. And so somebody's like, I've just been sitting here on my phone. Why am I feeling anxious? It's easy to blame the phone and the screen, because we get all this input. There's so much brilliant research coming out, like Anxious Generation book, all of that's coming out. And the body, the way that your body is being positioned. So a really good hack for that is every 20 minutes or so is try to rotate your head and your eyes. And so all the way to the left, all the way to the right, and then you focus on something close up, something far, and then back, and then you go back at your thing. And so that can interrupt those danger pathways that are coming from inside the body just by position.
It's super interesting because it's like when an animal has become hypervigilant in the setting of a fight, flight, freeze stimulus or response, their vision probably fixates on a certain point.
Yeah.
Right? The source of threat.
Yeah.
But by kind of like zooming out, changing your gaze. Well, in a way, you're likely like reverse engineering this response by fixating on a certain point, as we so frequently do today, whether it's with our smartphones or on TVs or what have you. But you can actually deconstruct and hack that response by just broadening out your vision to take on a more panoramic gaze, I suppose.
Brilliant. Are you familiar with brain spotting?
No, what's that?
So it's this form of therapy. So we have EMDR therapy, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy.
I've tried that. Yeah, my therapist is a big fan of that.
Ooh, I want to hear more about that. Sidebar. And so brain spotting, the researcher was like, there's something about the movement of the eye, the positioning of the eye. And then also, have you ever just had a really good zone out where you just like fix your gaze and you just zone and you don't want to move your eyes because it feels so good just to have your eyes wherever?
Yeah.
It's always something inappropriate, right? You're like, I'm sorry, I can't stop staring at that part of you because I'm just in a zone.
Yes.
You're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So he's looking at that. And so what he did is he started to examine kind of a grid. And so he has you, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, is you focus your eyes, and he'll use like a pointer of some sort, and they'll have you rotate your eyes across and down a grid. And so you notice in your body, you can notice, okay, I feel kind of activated when I rotate my eyes up into this direction. Or sometimes they can use it for calming. So like in that zone, like for me, I'm looking over here, it's like 4 o'clock there, and I'm like, that's a nice, whatever it is about that feedback loop into the brain spotting. So
it's so cool.
Yeah. There's all sorts of cool therapies that are out there. And it's what I think is really neat is that it gives us opportunities to, as you were saying, like reverse engineer, like maybe this is giving me data about underneath process that could be going wrong, that's producing this state that then gets mitigated by this intervention.
Yeah. How has your training as a naturopathic doctor, I mean, how has that informed your perspective on the treatment of anxiety? And also, what role has anxiety played in your life? I mean, oftentimes when you bring people in and they're super passionate about a certain topic, it's because they themselves have had direct experience with whatever that topic happens to be.
I love that so much. When I was in 3rd grade, I had a fanny pack that had a first aid kit inside.
Wow.
You're like, I didn't expect that.
Just preparing for the worst all
Yes.
the time.
Yes. And so I grew up in a family culture where my dad is a veteran and he had lots of emotional expression that came out in anger. And my role in the family that I probably self-imposed, maybe reinforced by my environment, was the person to make everyone else feel better. And as a child, it was very concrete. It's like, Band-Aids make people feel better. I'm going to have Band-Aids. And I started to develop these traits that were like the winter coat, right? And so it's like, okay, I notice when my dad does this sort of expression with his eyebrows that he's irritated. And so I can try to curb that by sitting in his lap and being silly, or bringing him a snack, or telling a joke, or complimenting him. And oftentimes that can calm the ire. And so hypervigilance, noticing other people's behaviors, noticing their body language. So this is autonomic arousal, and this is amygdala, emotional attunement. And oftentimes a lot of our healers have this kind of a training from childhood. They've been parentified or whatever it is for them. So I graduated from the fanny pack and went and studied psychobiology in college. And I loved studying the connection between the brain and the gut. But I was on 6 different prescription medications. I had all these symptoms. So I had horrible congestion, horrible digestive issues. I was anxious. I was on inhalers because I had asthma. And so I was taking all these prescriptions and I wasn't getting any better. So I was like, I have to do something different. So I got a master's in counseling. But then I was in counseling, and I remember one day I was working in a suburb at a rehab with adolescents. And there was this girl sitting next to me. And so the group therapy that I was leading was at 8 o'clock at night. And she's sitting next to me, and she's got a caffeinated beverage in her hand. And her drug of choice is cocaine. And so she's drinking that. She's talking about her cocaine relapse. And her main concern was sleeplessness and anxiety. And as a counselor, we can talk about, okay, let's talk about your behaviors. Let's talk about your coping skills. Let's talk about why you do what you do. Let's support you. But we had to send her to a psychiatrist to manage possible medical causes of her insomnia, which in my mind were like obviously cocaine and caffeinated drinks at 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
But they gave her Ambien, which is a hypnotic. It's a controlled substance. So now you have this 16-year-old brain that's on all of these substances. And I was like, oh my God, I can't be a part of this. I can't be a part of the system. So I went to naturopathic medical school, where I learned a fundamentally different way of looking at things. I learned that the body tells us what needs healing and how. I learned that the body is incredibly capable of healing itself, which we see in the scientific literature. We see neuroplasticity. If you fall and scrape your knee without you doing anything about it, that scrape will heal. Why wouldn't it be the same for our emotional well-being and our trauma and our anxiety and our all of the things, right? And so I set out to prove to myself that we could heal anxiety. And then I hit the dark circle of hell, if you will, where it was in 2015. And I stopped sleeping. And I tried herbs. I tried diet. I let an Ayurvedic practitioner pour oil on my third eye, and I just cried. I took all the benzos. I took antidepressants. I did EMDR. I did brain spotting. I did acupuncture. I did chiropractic medicine. All of the things to make my anxiety stop. It just got louder. And I lost weight. I stopped having my period. I couldn't eat. And when we are in that kind of rock bottom, dark circle of hell, we have the opportunity. I'm thinking of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, right? So we go through, we say yes to the adventure, we're learning, we're evolving, but then everything breaks down. The world that we've built doesn't work anymore. And so now we go with it or we reconstruct it. And I was like, I'm going to reconstruct it. And so I started, instead of asking, how can I make anxiety stop? I started asking, what is my anxiety trying to tell me? And I started holding space for my anxiety, and I started befriending my anxiety, and I started learning about my anxiety. And those answers are what changed my life, to where now when I experience autonomic arousal, it's not fearful anymore. I don't feel anxious. I feel aroused. And I'm like, what is that? Oh, I had 3 espressos today. Or I have an exciting interview today. Or I have to fly, and it's so stressful, right? So that's kind of my rock bottom, and how naturopathic medicine was life-changing for me. But we want to be mindful that we're not just using natural substances allopathically. We want to use natural substances to answer the questions that the body is giving us, right?
What would you say are the top natural substances that can help potentially with anxiety?
Psychobiotics is number 1.
Psychobiotics.
Yes. Okay, so psychobiotics. So we've studied the gut microbiome extensively, and there's a book, it's called The Psychobiotic Revolution. I highly recommend it. It's so good, by Scott Anderson. And so there's over 400 trials looking at the microbiome. And when we used to give probiotics, it would be just a big swath. Like I used to tell patients, take 80 billion with as many different bugs as you can, because microbial diversity is the name of the game, right? And then we started doing research on specific microbes and their specific actions. And so some microbes can increase GABA. Some microbes can increase dopamine. Some microbes can increase serotonin. Some microbes make butyrate, which can heal if you have inflammation or leaky fenestrations in the gut that's causing leaky gut, leaky brain, right? And so suddenly we could be really strategic in what we're giving to people. And so if I was to do nothing else with a client, is I would say, let's go to your gut. Your gut regulates your immune system. Your gut regulates your hormones. Your gut regulates your mood. Everything, it goes to the gut, your diet, your nutrition. So that would be number 1, is psychobiotics. These are the probiotics.
Even if somebody doesn't have GI symptoms of note, I mean, if somebody's like, my digestion's great, you would still investigate the gut.
I would be less likely to if they have gut anxiety, for sure. But if somebody just calls me and they're like, I have all of the things, my whole body's in rebellion, I didn't take the 9 types of anxiety quiz because it's worthless, I have all of them, I'd be like, when in doubt, start with the gut.
Now, are there specific strains that are worth considering? I mean, we've definitely spent a lot of time talking about gut health and the relationship between the gut and the brain on the podcast. But yeah, I mean, what's like a good, I don't know, yeah, what strains would you say have the most evidence in terms of like a psychobiotic effect? Yeah.
I like Lactobacillus reuteri because it's been studied to be vagus nerve dependent. So this means if you give somebody the psychobiotic, and they did this in mouse studies, and they sever the vagus nerve so it can't communicate with the gut anymore, that effect of the psychobiotic was nullified. And so I think it's brilliant that this bacteria, the Lactobacillus reuteri, can actually communicate to the vagus nerve, which was that first step we were talking about. When you're anxious, you start in the brain, you stimulate the vagus nerve, you bring yourself back into your body. So that Bifidobacterium is really good. Bifidobacterium longum, Bifidobacteria lactis, the Lactobacillus. But it's all about diversity, and it's all about synergy, because just like you're amazing, and you may have people, when you hang out with them, your amazingness is genius level. And then other people, when you hang out with them, you're like, this is not good chemistry.
Yeah.
It's the same with our gut. And so, not all probiotics and psychobiotics are created equal. You want to make sure it's a synergistic formula and not one that has bacteria that are going to antagonize.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about, what are some others? I mean, I've heard theanine is great. I use that.
Yes.
GABA, I've seen in certain supplement formulations.
Yeah. Let's do it this way. So 9 types of anxiety. So somebody has nervous system anxiety, where the anxiety is showing up in the muscles and the nerves. I love valerian and magnesium. Valerian is really good because it stimulates GABA, it restores sleep circadian rhythm patterns. Sleep circadian rhythm is going to change melatonin, inflammation, serotonin, which then has a triple down effect to your hormones. So valerian is a really good herb for that. It's really quick for anxiety too. I love magnesium for nervous system anxiety because oftentimes If we are exposed to environmental toxins like heavy metals, they can displace magnesium, and then nothing is working well. And most Americans are depleted in magnesium. So that would be nervous system anxiety. If it's gut anxiety, where it shows up in the gut, I would say a psychobiotic. If it is thought anxiety, I love theanine for that. Theanine can help with those looping, intrusive, racing thoughts. Like if you're trying to fall asleep at night and your brain is just like ruminating, theanine is awesome for that. If you have chest anxiety, where it's like instead of taking a beta blocker, we can look at, okay, so what might be useful for this region of my body? I'm thinking about Melissa officinalis, which is lemon balm.
Lemon balm.
Yeah.
I've actually seen that in certain like sleep supplement formulations. What does that do?
It is an anxiolytic, which means it's been studied for its ability to overall reduce anxiety, and it has all sorts of active constituents that have been studied and why they do that. And it's been called sunshine for the heart.
Whoa.
And so lemon balm can lift the mood. So it can be an antidepressant, but it can also calm anxiety. And it has an accumulative effect over time. So you can grow it in your garden, put it in your salads. You can use it as a tincture. You can take it as a capsule. I love lemon balm, especially for chest anxiety.
Is lemon balm different from lemon?
It's different from lemon. It's in the mint family, actually.
Oh, wow.
But if you rub the leaves, they'll smell lemony.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There was a really cool study, just going back to theanine real quickly, that I posted. Just it's top of mind because I stumbled upon it. And it's a 2023 study. It found that theanine helps to maintain sleep quality in healthy young women by suppressing the increase in caffeine-induced wakefulness after sleep onset. What I thought was so cool about the study is that, you know, if there's any compound that seems to be an antidote to caffeine, it's theanine, at least in terms of what the literature says.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we're all occasionally guilty of, you know, that cup of coffee too late in the day or the cup of tea or whatever. And so it's cool to, you know, to have theanine as a potential antidote.
That's how I discovered theanine, actually. I was like driving to class one day and I was like pounding a mocha. And so I called my friend. I was like, my heart is pounding. I think I'm having a panic attack. And so she deduced that I just drank too much caffeine. When I got to school, she gave me theanine, and it was like, so now I travel with it. I have theanine. It pairs really well with inositol. Have you ever used that?
I have it in like one of my cupboards, and I've used it intermittently, but I can't say that I've like felt anything from it.
Yeah.
What's inositol?
Inositol also increases GABA. It is really good to sip on all day. And so inositol is great for the brain. It's great for the gut. It synergizes theanine. It tastes kind of good and sweet. So
I love it. I actually break open the capsules and I just like sprinkle it into my mouth. It tastes kind of like maple syrup.
It
like
does.
Really delicious.
So it's tolerable for kids. So if anyone in your audience has kids and they're anxious and they're like, I don't want to give them something that's like dangerous.
Oh, they'll love inositol.
Yeah.
Inositol.
Yeah, you could just like sprinkle it in their sugary drinks or their whatever, their smoothies. Just like give it to them. Help them with their GABA.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I love theanine and inositol.
And also inositol is really helpful for PCOS, is it not?
Yes. I write about that. One of the avatars in my book, her name is Esme, and she has horrible trauma. We talk about parts work. And then she has PCOS and panic, and inositol was a staple of her treatment.
Wow.
Yeah. You know your amino acids.
Yeah, you know.
Which is really good too. I like focusing on amino acids more than GABA. So you can buy GABA supplements over the counter, but the problem is that the molecular size of GABA is generally too big to cross the blood-brain barrier. And so we might see it having a peripheral action. So maybe it affects the gut microbiome or different actions. But if you take the precursors like theanine, inositol, taurine, phosphatidylserine, we could talk about that.
Yeah, what's that?
So that is so good for your brain. And if your anxiety is caused by endocrine anxiety, so it's an imbalance in cortisol, stress hormone levels, phosphatidylserine can reduce stress hormone and help repair the hormones. And it helps with racing thoughts. It helps with sleep. And I love pairing it with theanine and inositol.
Interesting. Yeah. Phosphatidylserine is like, I've seen some studies where it seems to be helpful for learning and memory too.
Yes.
They've used it in, I want to say like dementia.
Yeah, it's great. It increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor And so it's great for cognitive longevity. So I feel like a genius kind of combination for someone who has like thought anxiety, right? So they have brain fog, they're burned out, they're a high performer, but they feel really stressed, is let's give them a little phosphatidylserine, maybe a little bit at bedtime because it can reduce that cortisol, and that's when you want to feel sleepy. But then you're going to get those beautiful cognitive boosting benefits in the morning. And then let's add in maybe a little bit of bacopa. Bacopa is an herb. It's an Ayurvedic herb. They call it Brahmi. And it has been studied for, it's what got me through medical school in part. So it's anti-anxiety. It balances your body. In Ayurveda, we call those your doshas. And so, are you familiar with Ayurveda?
Vaguely.
Like vaguely. So traditional Chinese medicine has been around for thousands of years, and they brought acupuncture to the United States. And Ayurveda comes from India. And so this predates all of our modern understanding of medicine. It predates traditional Chinese medicine. And so they talk about how illness occurs when we go out of balance into different directions. And so if you tend to be more kapha, you're lethargic, you feel heavy, maybe you gain weight, you feel just like I can't do anything, brain fog. Pitta is like irritable, fiery, speedy, restless. And then vata is like ADHD, like your head is in the clouds. So they teach that you want to have solutions that restore balance to your doshas, because then your body can heal itself. So circling back to bacopa, that's an herb that is useful for all of the dosha imbalances. And so that, in addition to what we found with modern research, is that Ayurveda knew what was going on. We're just proving it now.
Oh yeah, isn't that always the case?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So when is the best time of day to take bacopa? Is that like a sleep aid, or is
Take it in the morning.
Oh, in the morning.
Yeah, it's so good in the morning. And I love taking it just as a capsule.
Interesting.
So you're going to do phosphatidylserine at night, maybe a little bit of theanine at night, maybe a little magnesium. And then in the morning, you can do like bacopa, maybe mix it with companion herbs. I'm thinking like ginkgo biloba, centella, maybe even like an aphrodisiac booster. So like ashwagandha for men, wild asparagus for women. All of these are studied. They all have, you could go onto PubMed and you can see. And I know you do that. I love that you advocate in that way.
Yeah. So wait, wild asparagus?
Yeah, you're
for
like,
women is an
circle back to that. Yeah.
You can't just we can't let that slip by.
Yeah.
So
Shatavari.
ashwagandha for men is a libido enhancer?
Yes.
And wild asparagus for women.
Yeah. So some women who take ashwagandha, especially PCOS, women who have a little bit of a tendency towards metabolizing into a dominant form of testosterone, they take ashwagandha, some get acne. And so they're like, well, I want the benefits of ashwagandha. I want to help my nervous system. I want to help with stress. I want to help with sleep. I want to help my energy, but I don't want these trade-offs. I love a great libido. Shatavari is your girl. So that's a great, wonderful plant.
Is that like an alias for wild asparagus? Is that?
Yes, Latin name. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Wild asparagus, which isn't the same thing as food.
It's
asparagus.
not.
Yeah, so when you go to the health food store, get the shatavari.
Very interesting.
I know.
What
All
are
the
your
men are going to go buy this right now.
Yeah, myself included.
Yeah.
What would you say, what are your thoughts on THC, if any, and CBD? Because a lot of people take that, certainly a huge market these days for weed products.
Yeah.
And I take a little bit of THC sometimes before I go to sleep with like CBD, CBN. Couldn't tell you what they're doing for me, but I do know, at least subjectively, anecdotally, they help when I'm feeling like I can't. Like those days where I feel like I've had, a lot of anxiety and I can't turn my brain off, like at night, really helpful, like low dose. 2.5 milligrams of THC with, I think, probably the same amount of CBD.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, the endocannabinoid system. And so what I love about using cannabis is that it is introducing people to herbalism as a viable treatment option. And I think that is amazing. And the thing that we want to look at is that these plants are growing in communities. They're growing with other plants. They're growing with minerals in the ground. They're growing with fungus, right? And so then we're starting to say, well, what's going on with psilocybin? And why is that being used by people? And what is the benefit? And who does it help? And what dose? And so I think it's interesting academically to look at them in isolation. So it's like, okay, I take THC at this dosage. What do I notice? But what would happen then if I explored synergy? So what does it pair well with? So you pair it with CBD and you have a better effect. Well, what else could it pair with that might pull out the benefits of others? Some herbs are great companion herbs. So when I build a tincture, for example, I usually use four plants. And so I'll have a lead herb, and that's the herb that has the most benefit that really matches my client. So we were talking about lemon balm earlier, Melissa officinalis. So if I have a patient and she's depressive anxiety, depressed, anxious, maybe her heart palpitates a little bit, she's just a little restless, irritable. And so Melissa can be great for that, lifting the mood, calming the anxiety. And then I'm like, okay, what's a good companion herb? What pairs well with that? And so lavender pairs really well with it. Leonoris is another plant that pairs well with it. So we've been able to look in the monographs of these plants, the research into these plants, to see like, okay, if I give someone plant A, like Melissa, and it has this effect on somebody, but if I mix it and I give plant A plus plant B, what is the result? And so it can be even better. So you're asking this brilliant question about what do you think of cannabis or THC, or I think it's brilliant. And let's keep doing research. Let's start looking at our other plant community and see maybe there's something that would be like shatavari and dehmania and ashwagandha. Those all pair brilliantly with that.
What are some other supplements that might help with sleep? Because a lot of people, today I feel like, are sleep deprived. It's a common, I see it all the time, just in terms of the feedback that I get from my audience, like do more episodes on sleep. My sleep is a wreck. And for some, I think it has, probably more to do with maybe new kids, new babies in the family. But just generally speaking, any other tools in the toolkit to enhance, sleep.
In addition to looking at the adaptation, so I have a friend who just had a baby, and he's hypervigilant. He wants to wake up when the baby wakes up because he's a good dad, right? So he's hypervigilant. And so what we want to be mindful about is I don't want to just conk him out, because then we're honoring one part of his experience and neglecting the other.
Yeah.
So, but sometimes you just got to conk them out. I get that. But let's say that they have a system worked out and that hypervigilance is too sticky and they can't take that coat off, right? And so in that example, then I would say, okay, as a result of this hypervigilance and this change of having a baby or whatever have you, what complementary adaptive mechanisms have taken place? What do I mean by that? Okay, so my behavior is that I get on my phone and I'm checking my work emails, and then I get in bed. And then as a result of the screen time, my melatonin production is suppressed. Okay, as a result of melatonin suppression, my serotonin may go up a little bit. As a result of my serotonin going up, my hormone production may change a little bit. And then as a result of hormone production changing, right? So it's like domino, domino, domino. So I think it's easy for us to say, like, just tell me 4 herbs that'll conk me out. And you can do that, and I would say put a semicolon at the end of that sentence. So yes, valerian, California poppy, kava kava, passion flower, lavender, dream sleep team, maybe with a little bit of inositol and theanine and taurine and glycine and phosphatidylserine. But in addition to all of those things that we take to sleep, put that semicolon there and say, okay, well, what is not sleeping well in adaptation to?
Yeah.
Why am I not sleeping well? So that I can go in and actually address that. Otherwise, you're going to end up like me, where someone's pouring hot oil on your third eye.
Yeah.
And getting nowhere.
Well, it's like so many of us, we're just staring continually into the bad news flashlight, aka our smartphones.
Yes.
Up until the point at which we go to bed, and we wonder why, the supplement's not helping, or why we're sleeping is crappy generally. But yeah, so it's like I like the idea of taking a holistic approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Smartphones are a big problem. Do you sleep with it by your bed? I do. And I know it's not the right thing to do. It doesn't really, I'm generally a very good sleeper though. I got like a 90 on my Oura Ring last night.
Whoa.
But that's not unusual for me. Like I'm generally a pretty good sleeper. And I sleep with my phone by my bed, which I know I shouldn't, but it doesn't seem to, do all that much harm.
Yeah.
What about room temperature? This is a big, a question that commonly comes up. Ideal room temperature for sleeping. Yeah.
Yeah. Our bodies do well with cooler rooms. And so then you can have lots of blankets, and some people do well, especially if we have sensory nervous system processing issues, is having that weight can help. And that, again, is going to be activating like the more grounded parts of the brain, getting you into that relaxed, calm state. So anything that you can do. I'm thinking about diffusing essential oils. We know aromatherapy. You have a cat. And so you want to be mindful about what's safe for your animal if you're diffusing. I had a teacher once who talked about if you are trying to calm the body, is just create a ritual where you put aromatherapy on your foot. So,
interesting.
Yeah. So, and I do this sometimes when I fly because no one wants to smell my oils on the plane. So you just like take a little bit of oil and you just put it on the bottom of your big toe and just put your socks on. And so as long as it's been studied to absorb through the body, like lavender has essential oil, some have a larger molecular size and they don't absorb. They just smell good.
Well, lavender does.
Lavender does.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And lavender is the one that's most relaxing, most anxiolytic.
I think so, but some people really swear by ylang ylang or peppermint. I hate peppermint. That's a story not for this podcast.
Peppermint seems like it would be stimulating.
I think it's stimulating, but it's what are we stimulating? So are you stimulating vagus nerve or are you stimulating arousal? The brain is really associative.
What are some other big rocks for people? I mean, and generally, are you seeing clinically, like people with more anxiety these days than maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago?
Yeah, way more. Everybody's more anxious. I personally think that the bad news flashlight, like you said, I think that's that's an environmental. We're all in a collective. Like as the collective, we are all more anxious. Everybody is more anxious. And so then we have to look at what's going on environmentally with our stimuli. I sleep with my phone by my bed. I'm not a great sleeper, so I feel called out. This is good. I'm going to move the phone.
Yeah, I can't help myself sometimes. But it hasn't, to be honest, it really hasn't affected my sleep in any significant way. So
think about this. Are you familiar with a stress diathesis model?
No, what's that?
Okay, so imagine that you have a big pitcher. And everybody has a pitcher that they're born with. So maybe your pitcher is like 5 gallons. And somebody else in this world may come in and they may just get a 2-gallon pitcher. And so this is what you came into this life. And the pitcher's job is to hold stress in the form of, we'll call it Kool-Aid, right? And so inside of the pitcher, you have ice cubes. Those are diatheses. Diatheses are vulnerabilities. Those are things that take up space in your pitcher that don't allow you to hold as much water, right? So if I have a 5-gallon pitcher and a 5-gallon pitcher empty of ice and a 5-gallon pitcher that's full of ice, right? You won't be able to pour as much Kool-Aid into the full one. And so these cubes can represent different things. And so it could be that I drink too much and I'm inflamed, or it could be that I have a defect in methylation. And so I have poor serotonin production. It could be that I get food out in plastic containers and I have xenoestrogen exposure. It could be that I grew up in an abusive environment and I have lots of trauma. It could be that I have mold in my building. We have a major mold problem right now. It could be
you in your building or just generally? Generally.
I did a podcast not too long ago and I walked into that building and I was like, oh, they have mold here.
Are you mold sensitive?
Mm-hmm. I can smell. I have a sniffer. I can sniff out mold. I don't smell it here. That's good.
That's good.
Yeah.
I recently did a dust test and I'm waiting for the results
You
actually
did?
to find out. Yeah. Do you know Michael Rubino?
Yes.
He was on the podcast recently. And
wow.
Mold and remediation expert, indoor air quality expert.
Yeah.
And I believe it's his company. I could be wrong, but he sent me a comped dust test.
That's
it's called
amazing.
The dust test. Yeah. And you basically swab the dust in every room in your house at the high level, the mid level, and the low level, like the dust on the floor. Every room in your house except the kitchen and bathrooms. And on this swab, you accumulate as much dust as possible. It's really kind of gross by the end of the process.
Yeah.
And you realize how much dust is like.
You're like, oh, I'm filthy. I had no idea.
even with regular, cleaning. and then you send the dust. You wear these like, latex gloves while you're doing it, and then you send this like what I think it's probably like just a Swiffer or something. It like attracts dust, and you send it off in this sealed, sterile envelope to the lab, and they assess like what you're being exposed to in your dust.
Oh my God, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's super cool. Although I haven't gotten the results back yet, and I'm kind of nervous to see what they find. But
and he'll remediate, so it's not just like sucks to be you.
Well, I don't think that I would. I'm not going to remediate where I live. I don't even know really fully what the term implies, but like, I don't own the place. I rent, so I'm not going to like, But I would be surprised if there was anything like major. I think today we're all being exposed to, VOCs and microplastics, and so I'm not expecting to find nothing. But the degree to which you can control, this stuff today, I think it gets overwhelming, like even for me. And there's a degree of like, there's an aspect of it that you can't control.
Right.
And so rather than freak out about it,
I
think if you can reduce your exposure and then do other things in your life to facilitate the detoxification of those exposures, and I think you're probably doing way better than average.
So what that involves is what you're doing is you're looking at your diatheses. You're looking at what might be going on in your environment, and you're like, okay, what can I biohack? What can I leverage? What can I change? What can I pivot here? Because we're not going to live without any ice cubes in our pitchers.
Yeah.
But we have power to shrink some of them, take some of them out. And then another thing that I'm thinking about, as you said, is just general histamine detoxification is, I think, a great idea for people. Is if you're anxious, just detox histamine. So it's immune system anxiety. So that chemical that gives us the watery eyes, the runny nose, the postnasal drip, the skin rash, those fun allergies that we get every spring or fall, histamine can be as stimulating as adrenaline. And so if you have symptoms, or if you get an environmental test and there's a lot of inflammatory factors in there, is just support histamine detox. That can make a big difference head to toe.
So what might that look like?
There are 3 pathways. So one is the DAO pathway, which is histamine production in the gut. And that's easy. You could just get an over-the-counter supplement for that. And then the second is methylation. And methylation helps us detox. It helps us make neurotransmitters. Methylation is great. And so I'm thinking about like methylfolate, or if somebody has anxiety from methylfolate, then get a different form like folinic acid.
Folinic acid? I never even heard of that.
Yeah, folinic acid.
And that's distinct from folic acid.
Exactly.
Right.
So they're different forms. And so sometimes people over-methylate, and that can make them really, really anxious or agitated or panicky. I had a patient once who got a methylfolate IV, and she has MTHFR, and she had a psychotic episode and stabbed her husband.
What?
Yeah. It was wild. He lived. But like these things, you can read Dirty
Is she
Genes.
in jail, or what's the...
She was psychotic.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Dirty Genes by Ben Lynch teaches a lot about this. So that's like another great.
He's like an OG MTHFR.
He's the OG.
Guru.
Yeah. He's a naturopath. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. So you can do methylation support. It's just not more is better. You got to like listen to your body. So if you take methylated B vitamins, methylfolate, methylcobalamin, and if you get a little anxious, then maybe switch to something like folinic acid and hydroxycobalamin. And if you, on the other hand, you're just really exhausted and tired all the time, and you take those B vitamins and you feel better, yay. The third is acetylation. And so acetylation is liver phase 2 detox. And so that's detoxing all sorts of things out of your body. And so those are going to be like calcium D-glucarate. This is going to be N-acetylcysteine. This is going to be your cruciferous veggies like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. So supporting that can be good. But there's one disclaimer, is that if you have high toxic burden, you want to make sure that your body is able to do a detox. So I have a lot of people, they reach out to me and they're like, okay, I want to do a detox. I want to really detox my liver. I want to do a histamine detox. And I'm like, okay, talk to your doctor first. And so if they talk to their doctor and they get testing done and they have high liver enzymes, you can't detox an inflamed liver. You want to make sure that you support the body first. So while we talk about when in doubt, immune system anxiety, those 3 pathways, the DAO, the methylation, the acetylation, is just make sure that you've seen your doctor first and that your kidneys are healthy and your liver is healthy. And then if that's all good, then rock and roll.
Now, what do you mean by detox? Because I feel like that's a term that's become a bit of a dirty word.
Yes.
Today. You know, it's been co-opted by supplement companies, and I think there's a bit of, you know, hyperbole that often accompanies talk of detoxing and the like. So yeah, what does that mean to you?
Removing obstacles to cure. And so when I do a detox, I will do like organic green juices that I make and juice myself and take away anything that might be inflammatory as far as foods. And so I'm not like eating out, and I'm not eating sugary foods, no alcohol, no, I love chocolate brownies. They're my jam, you know, taking that kind of stuff out. So removing obstacles to cure. Any foods that tend to not agree with you. So if objectively eating a hamburger is good and you feel great when you eat a hamburger, then eat the hamburger. But if you eat then turkey and you feel like sick to your stomach, then that would be something to remove. So one is removing obstacles to your body. So it's like, what is the stress going in? And then supporting detoxification pathways. And as you said, there are so many supplements and nutrients for that, but we can do that oftentimes with nutrition and with plants. And so fiber, because that's going to go in and help with your butyrate producing bacteria. It's going to improve microbial diversity. Butyrate heals the gut. It brings down inflammation. It's like aloe vera for a sunburn, right? And you can eat fiber just from food at the grocery store. You don't have to buy a fiber supplement. And then supporting liver detox, just basic liver detox supplements like methylated Bs, DAO, and the cruciferous veggies, which you can get just greens powders. So I like to be mindful about it, because otherwise it's an opportunity to capitalize on a program.
Yeah, I think you could do a lot with food and making sure that you're pooping regularly, peeing, you know, sweating. Yeah, peeing, pooping, sweating.
Yeah, crying.
It's like an emotional detox.
Yeah, we call these emunctories. And so these are the ways the body releases things that it's stored inside. And so what Lindlar used to teach about, he was a physician back in the 1800s, is he used to teach you got to move blood and lymph and open the emunctories. And so they were doing water treatments, so alternating hot and cold, showers, baths. You can do warming compresses. So you take a warm shower and then you take a sheet from your bed, you get it wet, you put it in the freezer. And then after you get out, I know I saw that. You're like, this sounds miserable.
Sounds crazy.
It works. I swear by it. So then you have your warm, toasty body and you lay the sheet flat on a wool blanket, and then you grab it and you burrito roll yourself up like a little caterpillar.
Wow. It's like at-home cryo.
It's at-home cryotherapy, and the objective is that you're stimulating your body's resources to heat up that sheet. So you're stimulating your body's vital essence. You're stimulating your ability to create heat and warmth and blood flow, because when you put that cold on there, you're going to have immediate vasoconstriction, right? But then the body's like, oh, well, we're warming up a little bit. We can preserve our extremities. So then your body will get warmer and the sheet will get warmer, and then you're going to have vasodilation in your extremities. And with that, you're pumping in delicious, fresh red blood cells and immune system cells, pumping out inflammatory cells, broken cells.
Wow.
So let's detox. That's the magic of detox, is removing obstacles to cure, supporting pathways, hydrotherapy, emunctories, sweating, crying, all of that.
I wonder if that's why people love these like ayahuasca journeys that have become so so popular.
Ooh, talk more.
Well, I've never done one, but you go on these like, you know, I've had friends that have done it, where they go on these like excursions into the jungles of Peru, and they do these like ayahuasca ceremonies, and they're like shitting their brains out, they're throwing everything up, they're also crying profusely.
Yeah.
So it's like this accelerated, like 72-hour detox is what it sounds like.
You're dumping everything out. Yeah.
I wonder. I've never done it. I don't have any interest in doing it, to be honest, but people that do it, you know, they say that that it's a really, like life-changing experience. But then usually there's like a, within 6 months, they're back to their old selves.
Right. There's obstacles to cure. I'm also thinking about the stickiness of the nervous system during an intervention. So, for example, there's this treatment. It's called nasal cranial release. Have you ever seen that, where they stick a balloon up your nose and inflate it?
I've seen it. Yeah. What is that?
Freaky.
It's incredibly painful, is it not?
I had it done on one side and then I didn't do it again. It didn't hurt. You just hear the bones in your head are like.
What?
So,
it's like chiropractic for your skull?
Yes.
Damn.
It's chiropractic for your skull. And so there's this interesting study that was done where they're like shoving balloons up the noses of these kids and improving cerebral spinal flow and all of this. Such cool reason.
It sounds crazy.
The efficacy was ridiculous, but they were comparing if they just do high velocity, just wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, just shove the balloon up there, pump, pump, and the kid's like, what was that? Versus like gentle inflations of the balloon again and again and again and again over a period of time. And what they found in this study was that if they do a really intense intervention, that the nervous system will go into sympathetic because it's kind of freaky, and then that doesn't hold as well. So if you can keep your body in a parasympathetic state while doing these treatments, it can work better. And so that's I think behind some of the ideas of ketamine and how they're doing ketamine ideas, is because you have this person who's very parasympathetic, and then they have a therapist who's doing the EMDR, guiding them through, and so that they're not going into that fear state, that danger state, and the treatment can stick.
Yeah.
So maybe ayahuasca, because they're altered, they're like having this objectively horrific experience, but they're like, it's fine.
Yeah. You got to be careful with all this shit, though. I mean, I feel like all the research about like MDMA and psilocybin, basically being used as monotherapies, like to acutely unravel decades of trauma. I mean, that to me is like super exciting, but people are now kind of taking, this really powerful medicine into their own hands.
Yeah.
And that was the case recently with Matthew Perry, you know,
absolutely
died, and all of these members of his team were indicted for facilitating this, this off-label use of ketamine. And it was really sad. I think it's really great that people are becoming more aware of these tools, but I think there is definitely a potential downside in the fact that, in the sense that people are using them without the appropriate set, outside of the appropriate set and setting where these tools are being studied.
I think that's really wise. And that's kind of circling back to why I was talking about, yes, if you want to do a detox, go to see your trusted doctor and make sure that your liver is able to do that and that your kidneys are able to do that. I think that the research is suggesting that people have less and less trust in their doctors right now. And I think that we are at a real turning point of becoming empowered collaborators with our doctors, as opposed to just going off the rails and like, my doctor doesn't know anything. I'm sick of the conventional medical model. And so how can we have conversations where we work together? And I think that empowerment's really important, but I think also what you say, if somebody doesn't understand, like maybe they have diabetes and they go and they do an ayahuasca trip and their blood sugar is completely destabilized, or they're using ketamine and then something tragic like that happens. And so what's going on? What are you trying to treat? What are the adaptive mechanisms? What is your body doing to adapt? And then how can we restore health to the body using these therapies, but not just trying to create a new disease state to overcome and obfuscate the old one?
Yeah, absolutely. How do you help patients build sustainable habits and strategies to manage their anxiety in the long run?
Yeah, I think that being mindful about the 4-step process is huge. And
wait, remind us what those steps are.
The first step is to calm the body with vagus nerve hacks. And then the second step is to use your top-down resources. And so that's like your analyzing mode, your talk therapy, like understanding all the things, listening to your podcast. People are just getting this brilliant information dump. right? It's a genius information dump.
That's the hope.
Yeah. So that's your second step is now that you've onboarded your logical brain, now you can use your logical brain. But the third step is then bridging the gap between brain and body. Because a lot of times we're like, I don't know why I'm anxious. My heart is racing and my legs are twitching and my jaw is tight. I have no idea why. Because we're not bridging the gap between brain and body. So that second step is you're onloading your logical brain. And then third step is to use the logical brain to then create awareness between the brain and the body so that when you're in the green zone and then you're starting to shift into the yellow zone, that you can stop the symptoms when they're whispers and you don't have to wait until there's screaming, right? So this is practicing interoception. It's doing perhaps a body scan. So you start at your feet. You just breathe, you just notice, you don't have to change anything. You're just observing. You work your way up, your thighs, your pelvis, your gut. You work all the way up and you just notice, right? Mindfulness meditation, transcendental meditation, yoga practices, anything that helps you become more aware and in partnership with your body. And then the fourth step is the often ignored step, and I think it's the most important step, and that's the reprogramming, which is the fun stuff that we're seeing now in neuroscience, is that all of those mechanisms of putting on that coat in Washington, D.C., that's all programmed. You've inherited programs, right? We talked about your 5-gallon pitcher. You inherited that program. It's in your DNA. It's in your family patterns. It's in your behaviors. It's in your habits. It's in your tendencies, your cravings. You inherited that. And then step 4 is to be intentional about reprogramming. And so what does that look like? So that is allowing yourself to go into autonomic arousal, because we always want to be calm, but you have to go into autonomic arousal. It's going to happen. It's a total normal part of your biology. To be human is to go into autonomic arousal. So you mindfully put yourself in autonomic arousal, and then you teach your body how to come out. So an example of this would be high intensity training, interval training. So you run really, really hard, and then you do that exercise that you and I did. You 4 square breathe, and you bring yourself into calm. Or you do a high ropes course and you freak out and then you get down and then you go back up and do it. So you're teaching your body, okay, when I go up, I can come down. So you're reprogramming all of that. And so I think that 4-step process is something that we should be doing all the time. And then we don't need to use a bunch of habits all the time to keep us into a calm state. Because sometimes the brain will associate habits with, if I don't do this habit, I'm not going to feel calm. We've seen this with sleep behaviorism. There's a book called Hello Sleep that came out, and she's like debunking all of these like sleep hygiene things that we've been told to do for 20 years. Because the brain is super associative and your world gets smaller and smaller. And so if it's like, I can't go to sleep at night if my phone's not in the living room, your world is smaller. You are like, I could put my phone in the other room, but I could sleep okay if it's there. So I love the questions about habits. Yes, there are many people that love talking about habits, but I am thinking, what is your programming and how are you programming it intentionally?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Super appreciate that. How long does it take to rewire, these old associations?
They suggest 90 to 120 days to create a new habit.
Whoa, cool.
Yeah, you got to be tenacious every day.
That's not a huge time investment. I mean, it's like 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, give yourself 3 to 4 months. And the journey is, did you see there's like a meme a while ago and they're like, my expectation of healing, and it's like a straight line. It's like a piece of uncooked spaghetti.
Yeah.
And then it's like reality is like a total cat ball of yarn.
Mm-hmm.
So I often tell my patients this is going to be 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And you're going to uncover layer after layer after layer, and there's going to be emotional stuff that comes up. Maybe you've heard like when people go and they get a massage and they're like, I don't know why, but I feel like bawling my eyes out in this massage table. The body keeps the score. And so your body's going to release and then you reprogram, and it releases and then you reprogram, and you'll just get there over time. You just got to be tenacious.
Yeah, you got to be tenacious. Well, thank you, Dr. Cain, for coming in. This was so fun.
This has been the best conversation.
Yeah?
Thank you. I loved it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I've got one last question for you before we get to that. Where can people find you on social media? How can they support your work? Where can they pick up your books, etc.?
My books, wherever books are sold. And so you could get it on Barnes & Noble. I like buying local, though. So if you have a local bookseller,
of course, bookseller, yeah.
Words. Yes, local bookseller. Go there. And I'm on Instagram at Dr. Nicole Cain, Cain. And I'd love to hang out there.
Love it. Wait, is this your first book?
It's my first book.
Oh,
what was it
congrats.
like for you? Your very
Amazing.
first book?
Chaotic.
Yeah, it's chaotic.
Wonderful, amazing. I mean, talk about like anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
Writing a health book is like the least healthy thing that you could do. It's so,
It is.
I mean, up all hours of the night, writing, editing, sleepless nights, and then the promotion of it is just like this crazy gauntlet of, media and stuff. And but I love it. I love it, and I'm super excited for you.
Thank you. Any words of wisdom?
Words of wisdom. Just show up to every interview as you have today, as the most authentic version of yourself, and I think that's there's nothing better than that. None of us get everything right 100% of the time, but as long as people know, I think, why it is that you're doing what you do, integrity is something that is hard to find these days, particularly at the public health scale. It's hard to find that because there's so many convoluting, competing interests, conflicts of interest, and so I think as long as you're leading with your why, that's always a good place to start.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, my heart is for those who are listening, is that you can heal. That anxiety is really hard. It's really painful. It's really agonizing. And if you can start to understand what it's trying to tell you, you can feel better. You can get your life back. And so that's my why.
Love that.
Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course. Last question that gets asked everyone on the show. What does living a genius life mean to you?
Living a genius life is, I think it takes genius to listen to the body and to understand what it's trying to tell you. That's not always easy. And so continually being curious and fascinated.
Yeah. Don't gaslight yourself.
Yes, that's right.
I like that. So cool. Well, thanks again for coming in. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.